Something stirs beneath the soil, the echoes of old magic, once bright and triumphant, now twist through darker paths. The heroes we followed are scarred or lost, and the forces that shaped the land now begin to unravel it. In the quiet after conquest, deeper conflicts awaken, not of sword and shield alone, but of legacy, loyalty, and the weight of what came before. The veil between worlds grows thin, shadows lengthen, and in the heart of myth, a reckoning begins. The winds had shifted across Eru. What once was still had begun to stir, and with it came war. The cause? Not kingship, not vengeance, but a bull. This is the beginning of the Ton Bokulinga, the cattle raid of Cooley, one of the greatest epics in Celtic mythology, a tale of pride, prophecy, and a single warrior standing against an army. Our story begins not in Ulster, but in Connaught. Queen May ruled there, proud, ambitious, cunning. She was a queen in every sense, not just a consort, but a leader, a strategist, and a force of nature. Her equal in wealth and power was her husband, Arliel. Yet one night, lying in bed, they debated who among them held the greater riches. Every weapon, jewel, and cloak was counted. Horses, lands, servants, all tallied. They were evenly matched, but one treasure tipped the scale. Arliel possessed Finn Bennock, a mighty white-horned bull, a beast of unparalleled power, born of magical lineage. And May, unwilling to accept being second to anyone, decided she must have a bull to match it, Don Qualinga, the brown bull of Cooley. This was no ordinary beast. Don Qualing was fierce, untamed, and sacred to the people of Ulster. He grazed the misty hills of the Cooley Peninsula, shrouded in enchantment. And May, determined to claim him, summoned her armies. But there was more to her plan than muscle. She sought diplomacy first. She sent envoys, offered land, gold, and promises. Yet as negotiations faltered and pride flared, threats replaced pleasantries. The people of Ulster refused to be bullied, and May declared war. She did not march alone. A massive host followed her, thousands strong, from all provinces of Ireland. Warriors, mercenaries, and champions pledged themselves to her banner. But Ulster was cursed. You see, Macha, an ancient goddess wronged by a king of Ulster, had placed a terrible guise, a magical curse, upon the land's warriors. In times of greatest need, they would fall into a weakness lasting 9 days, racked with pain and unable to fight. And so, as May's army advanced, the warriors of Ulster lay helpless in their beds, all except one, Cuchulainn. Too young to have been born when the curse took hold, he stood alone, an unbroken shield against a storm, just a boy but already a legend, and it was he who would face the full might of Meb's army, delaying them not with brute force but with honor. He invoked an ancient Celtic custom, single combat. One warrior at a time would face him in battle. Mev, bound by the warrior code, was forced to honor it. And so began the duels. One by one, the finest champions of Ireland came against the Hound of Ulster, and one by one they fell. Cuchulainn fought not for glory but for duty. He battled with blades, spears, and bare hands. Each day he stood alone. Each night he wept, wounded and exhausted, knowing he must rise again come dawn. As the days wore on, the tone of the war shifted. Mev grew impatient, desperate to break the stalemate. She sent assassins. She used magic. She attempted deception. But nothing could shake the boy warrior from his path. Behind him, the Ulstermen began to stir. The curse, slowly lifting, would soon bring their armies back into the fray. But until then, Cuchulainn held the line alone. This episode marks the beginning of the Great Ton, the war that would define generations of Celtic heroes. But deeper than the battles lies a tale of pride and honor, of a queen's need to be seen as equal, of a lone warrior standing between his people and destruction. It is a tale of obsession, with power, with glory, with legend, and it is far from over, for next comes betrayal, heartbreak, and the most tragic of duels, when blood will be drawn not just from enemies, but from family. But for now, the brown bull of Cooley still grazes, the hills are silent before the storm, and the greatest saga in Irish myth continues to unfold. The River Dee ran shallow and quiet that day, its gentle waters unaware of the blood it would soon carry. After weeks of relentless single combat, Cuchulainn had grown weary, not just in body but in soul. War was no longer glory, it was a grind of faces and steel, a rhythm of death repeated endlessly. Each warrior he struck down left another weight on his shoulders, but none as heavy as the one approaching next. Ferdiad. Cuchulainn saw him coming long before they met at the ford. He recognized the stance, the way he held his shield, the ceremonial cloak. This was no ordinary champion sent by Queen Meave. This was a brother in arms, a childhood friend, a mirror. They had trained together under Scarhach, the legendary warrior witch of Alba. Their bond had been forged in the heat of battle drills and the bitter winters of the north. Ferdiad was the only warrior who ever came close to matching Cuchulainn blow for blow. Theirs was not rivalry but mutual respect, even love by some tellings. And yet, here they stood, on opposite banks of the River Dee, each bound to kill the other. Why? Because Maeve had poisoned Ferdiad's pride. She promised gold, titles, the hand of her daughter, even a throne. But more than that, she played on his wounds. You were always second to him, she whispered. You were the shadow, the sparring partner, the almost great. Ferdiad did not hate Cuchulainn, but he could no longer stand being lesser. And so, with heavy heart and clouded mind, he accepted. Their battle began in silence. No mocking words, no boasts, just a nod, the kind warriors give before doing what neither wishes to do. On the first day they fought with spears and light arms. It was like watching a dance between mirrors. Each thrust matched, each step counted. They wounded one another, but not deeply. There was still hesitation, still memory. When night came, they paused. And in one of the most human moments of the Tyne, they embraced. Together they dressed each other's wounds, shared food, and recalled tales from their youth. There were no enemies that night, only men remembering better days. The second day was colder. Both knew now what must be done. They escalated the combat. Heavier weapons, more brutal techniques. Ferdiad wielded his famed shield of horn. Cuchulainn answered with the sling of sure aim. The river churned red with effort and blood. Again they parted at dusk. Again they broke bread. But the silences were longer, the laughter forced. Both understood. If they met again on the third day, one would not return. The final day arrived like a death knell. Ferdiad came wearing enchanted armor, his skin magically hardened, nearly invulnerable. And in his hand, the dreaded Gaea Bulg, the barbed spear taught only to Cuchulainn, but now turned against him. Cuchulainn hesitated. This was not some nameless warrior. This was Ferdiad, brother of his soul. But fate and the will of kings does not bend for sentiment. Their final clash was fierce beyond compare. Blades shattered, shields splintered. The very riverbed seemed to recoil from the violence. But Ferdiad had the advantage, strength enhanced by Mieb's sorcery, unyielding armor, and the Gaea Bulg. As Cuchulainn staggered back, wounded and desperate, he remembered his secret weapon, the real Gaea Bulg, the one only he had mastered. He had hidden it with his loyal charioteer, Leg, who waited downstream. Feigning retreat, Cuchulainn called to Laeg. With a subtle signal, the deadly spear was floated toward him, unseen beneath the water's surface. Cuchulainn caught it with his foot, in the method taught only to him, and with a final, heart-wrenching cry, he drove it upward into Ferdiad's body, bypassing his armor, severing sinew and bone, piercing heart and spirit. Ferdiad's eyes widened in shock, then softened. He collapsed into Cuchulainn's arms, the same arms that once helped him climb the cliffs of Alba, the same arms that now cradled his final breath. Cuchulainn wept like no warrior had before. He did not shout, he did not curse. He held Ferdiad close and spoke through broken sobs. "O Ferdiad, my brother, you were deceived by silver tongues and poisoned pride, not by me, never by me." The ford where they fought became known as Athfirdia, Ferdiad's ford, and even centuries later, it remains a place of mourning and memory. Cuchulainn fought on in the war, but something in him had died that day. The boy who had laughed by firelight with Ferdiad was gone. In his place stood a weapon, a legend, a ghost. This was not just a battle of warriors. It was the collapse of brotherhood, of shared pasts torn apart by ambition and the games of rulers. Ferdiad and Cuchulainn were both victims, not of each other, but of a world that demanded sacrifice for greatness. And in that truth lies the heart of Celtic myth. Heroism is not triumph without cost. It is pain endured for people who will never know your name. The wind howled across the stone fort of Eamon carrying the smell of salt from the sea and smoke from far-off fires. Cuchulainn stood alone on the ramparts, eyes fixed on the distant hills. The war was over, but peace had not returned, not to Ulster and not to him. After the death of Ferdiad and the retreat of Queen Maeve's forces, the warriors of Ulster sang songs of victory. But in Cuchulainn's ears there was only silence. He had defended his people, yes, held the line when no one else could. But at what cost? He had become a weapon so sharp it could no longer be held without drawing blood. Even from those closest to him, there were whispers now, not of praise, but fear. Children no longer ran to greet him when he passed. Women averted their eyes. Even old companions lowered their voices in his presence. He was no longer the gifted youth of Ulster. He was the hound of war, a killer. And in his quiet moments, he wondered if they were right to fear him. But fate was not done with him yet. Word came of an army assembling in the east, a coalition of rival clans stirred by the chaos left in the wake of the Tyne Bo Cúailnge, and among them was a woman of shadow and prophecy, the Morrigan. She had haunted Cuchulainn's path before, appearing as a crow, a wolf, a seductress, offering power, foretelling doom. He had spurned her once, and she had never forgotten. Now she came not in riddles, but in fire. Her prophecy had long hung over him, that his life would burn bright but short, that his end would come not by blade alone, but by destiny itself, and that the signs of his death would be unmistakable. 3 signs, in fact. The first was the breaking of his chariot. As Cuchulainn rode out to meet this new threat, his chariot wheel shattered at the edge of a ford, not by rock or sabotage, but as if the earth itself rejected his passage. Laeg, his charioteer, said nothing, but his eyes betrayed the fear he dared not speak. The second sign came in the form of a woman, old, blind, and veiled. She offered Cuchulainn a drink of milk from a 3-spouted cup. To refuse would be dishonor, but as he drank, he felt something cold coil inside his gut. The milk was sour, the cup, a vessel of fate. And the woman? Many believe she was the Morrigan in disguise. The third sign was the scream, not human, but inhuman, a keening wail that split the sky as he reached the battlefield. Birds circled overhead, black as pitch, their eyes glowing like embers. He knew then his time had come. But even in the face of certain death, Cuchulainn did not waver. He stood alone against an army, his body a map of old wounds, his strength not what it once was, but his spirit burned undimmed. He fought like a man possessed, striking down foes with the speed and precision of legend. For hours he held them back, a wall of muscle and fury. But numbers tell their own truth. Spears rained down, blades found gaps in armor, blood flowed freely, and then came the final wound. A spear through the gut, cast by Lugard MacConroy, a warrior with a personal vendetta and a borrowed fate. Cuchulainn did not fall. Even dying, he would not give them that satisfaction. He staggered to a nearby standing stone, a tall, jagged pillar said to mark an ancient burial ground. With his last strength he bound himself to it, standing upright, eyes fixed on the battlefield. Even in death, he would face his enemies. The warriors dared not approach him. Was he dead? Was he waiting to strike? His stillness unnerved them. Only when a raven, black and watchful, landed on his shoulder did they understand. The Hound of Ulster had fallen, but not in retreat. Never in retreat. His body remained upright, even in death, a warning, a monument, a final defiance of fate itself. And in that moment, the legends say, the Morrigan wept. Some claim it was victory, others regret, but all agree. Something sacred passed from the world that day. Cuchulainn was not just a warrior. He was the embodiment of Celtic heroism, flawed, fiery, doomed, but utterly unyielding. His tale is not a story of triumph, but of sacrifice, of standing alone when no one else would, of dying not because he was weak, but because he had given everything. Even now, centuries later, his name is whispered in battlefields and sung in old songs, a reminder that true greatness is not measured by how long one lives, but by how fiercely one burns while the flame lasts. And as the mists close over the green hills of Ulster, and the crow flies once more across the sky, we remember the boy who became a legend, and the legend who became a god. The land mourned in silence. With Cuchulainn gone, it was as if a vital pulse had stopped beating beneath the hills of Ulster. The winds blew softer. The rivers ran slower. Even the warriors, hardened and long used to death, walked with their heads lowered. There would never be another like him. But though his body lay still, his story had only begun. Word of his death spread like fire across the 5 provinces. Allies mourned, enemies rejoiced. But none could deny the weight of his legacy. Cuchulainn had held the armies of Connacht at bay. He had bested heroes, he had fulfilled prophecy, and in doing so he had elevated myth into memory, and memory into meaning. There was one, however, who did not weep, Medb. The Queen of Connacht, architect of the Táin Bó Cúailnge, now sat upon her throne not in triumph, but in tension. Her great cattle raid had ended in ashes. Her armies had been broken. Her champions, Ferdiad, Lugard and others, were gone. And though she had outlived her enemy, she could not escape the shadow he had cast. Cuchulainn's ghost lingered. At night, Medb heard hoofbeats that never approached. Her dreams were filled with blue-tinted eyes and a spear that never missed. Her counselors whispered of omens, rivers that reversed, stars that blinked out, beasts born with no eyes or mouths. The land itself seemed to protest. In truth, Ulster had not forgiven her, nor had fate, and neither had Cuchulainn's son. His name was Connla. Born of Cuchulainn and Aoife, the warrior woman of Alba, Connla had been raised far across the sea, knowing little of his father beyond stories. But the stories were enough. Tales of a warrior unmatched, of honor, courage and sacrifice. As he came of age, Connla set sail for Ireland, not in conquest but in quiet purpose. He wanted to see the land of his blood, to learn what kind of man his father had truly been. He came alone, without escort or fanfare, and when he landed, he told no one his name. But destiny has a way of revealing what is hidden. Connla was strong, unnaturally so. He fought with grace beyond his years. He carried a token given by his mother, a golden ring marked with the crest of the red branch. The warriors of Ulster watched him, puzzled and wary. This stranger bore the look of someone they had seen before, someone they had buried with tears and songs. His movements echoed Cuchulainn's, his silence felt familiar. Suspicion turned to fear. Some, including the aging Conhor MacNessa, feared he was a threat. An assassin, perhaps, a usurper. And when Connla refused to give his name, bound by a vow made to his mother, they saw defiance where there was only duty. And so they sent a champion to meet him, and Connla defeated him. Then another and another. Each time, the stranger refused to speak his name. Each time, he fought with restraint, but Ulster had known too much pain to take chances. Eventually, the council made a decision. Send Setanta's equal, send Laigare, send Conall Sena. But they hesitated, for deep down they too sensed the truth. In the end, it was Conall who stepped forward, but even he was reluctant. Before long the fighting stopped, not because Connla was defeated, but because Conall recognized the pattern, the footwork, the way he held the spear. It was like watching a ghost, and Conall, heart pounding, asked him one final time, "Who are you, boy?" Conall looked at him, then at the sky, then at the red branch hall beyond the trees, and finally he spoke. "I am Conall, son of Cuchulainn." The air went still. What happened next varies by telling. In some versions, Conall is embraced, welcomed home. In others, the truth is realized too late, only after he is mortally wounded, cut down in mistaken defense of Ulster. A second tragedy, echoing the first. But in every tale, the message is the same. Legacy is not stone or crown. It is not cattle or land or songs. It is blood. It is memory. It is the child who returns to the father's land, hoping to understand who he is, and finding, instead, the same fate waiting. Cuchulainn had stood alone in life. In death, his blood returned to walk the same path, and thus the myth of the hound became more than a tale of war. It became a cycle, father to son, warrior to heir, flame to ember. And the people of Ireland, hearing this tale, felt both pride and sorrow, for they knew that greatness often walks alone, and that the price of legend is never paid by the hero alone. In the wake of Conall's revelation, a hush fell over Ulster. The boy had spoken, and with his words the circle closed. The son of the hound, born in secrecy, raised in shadow, had come seeking his place in the world, only to be swallowed by the same forces that had claimed his father. It was a tragedy, yes, but it was also inevitable, because Celtic myth is not a tale of happy endings. It is a mirror to the cycles of nature, life, death, return. It teaches through sorrow. It remembers through repetition. And so, our final tale is not one of battle or betrayal, but of remembering. Years had passed since the death of Cuchulainn and his son. The Red Branch Hall stood quieter now, its warriors fewer, its feasts shorter. The age of heroes was fading. Conher MacNessa had grown old. The bards sang of past glory more often than present deeds. And whispers spread across the land, whispers of a changing world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and bathed the land in amber light, an old druid arrived at the gates of Eamon. He was bent with age, robed in grey, and bore a staff carved with ancient runes. The guards let him pass without question, as if some deeper instinct told them he was expected. He was not here to warn of war or foretell doom. He had come to speak of memory. Inside the great hall, he called for the warriors and their kin to gather. The hearth was lit, the silence deepened, and then, in a voice both soft and strong, he began to speak, not just of Setanta, the boy hero, but of the old gods before him, of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the shining ones, of the Morrigan, the phantom queen, of the Dagda, the father figure with his cauldron of endless bounty, of Lu, the long-armed one, warrior and craftsman both. He spoke of the children of Lear, turned to swans by a jealous stepmother, bound to wander for centuries until the arrival of a new faith, of Fionn mac Cúhail, the wise warrior who ate the salmon of knowledge and led the Fianna through forests and prophecy, of Brigid, the goddess of spring and inspiration, flame of poets and healers. And as he spoke, something changed. The people remembered, not just the tales, but the truths within them. That power is fleeting, that wisdom often comes cloaked in pain, that greatness must walk through darkness to shape light. These were not stories to be consumed. They were lessons passed down like seeds, waiting to bloom again. The druid's eyes sparkled as he turned his gaze to the children seated near the fire. "You must carry the tales now," he said. "Not because they are old, but because they are true in ways the world still forgets. Each of you is the spark of a story, and stories never truly die." Outside, the winds shifted. The land, once steeped in blood and loss, now hummed with quiet hope, and far away, where the sea met the sky, some say the gods listened. The Morrigan shapeshifter and shadow walked the cliffs, watching, not with grief, but with satisfaction. Fate had played its part, the cycle had turned. And though Ulster slept, new tales were already forming in the hearts of those yet born, because Celtic mythology, at its core, is not a record of the past. It is a living echo. It is the whisper of wind through standing stones, the glint of sunrise on dew-covered grass, the sense in some forgotten glen that someone walks beside you even when you are alone. It is the fierce love of a mother, the agony of a warrior's oath, the burden of prophecy, and the resilience of a people whose identity could not be conquered, not by steel, not by time, not even by forgetting. And as the druid's tale ended, the people of Vaca did not cheer, they did not feast. They sat in reverent silence, letting the echoes settle around them, because they understood. The greatest stories are not the loudest, but the ones that remain when everything else fades. And somewhere in the land of mist and memory, the Hound of Ulster stood once more, unbroken, unbent, and eternal. And so concludes our journey through the mists of Celtic mythology. We've walked with gods and heroes, faced curses and prophecies, and stood at the edge of worlds, seen and unseen. From the tragic might of Cuchulainn to the eerie grace of the Morrigan, these stories echo across time, not as relics, but as reminders. Reminders that courage can be quiet, that wisdom may come cloaked in pain, that love, loyalty, and sacrifice shape legends just as much as swords and spells. The Celts did not write their myths to preserve history. They breathed them into the land itself, into the standing stones, the shadowed glens, the crashing waves. And even now, if you listen hard, you may still hear them. Until next time, listen closely, for there are always more tales to tell.